All right, this system for conceiving self-esteem might seem a little bit contrived, but it's actually quite technical, and it has a foundation in science. So, just very high level, self-esteem is not a mood. It's not an emotion. It's not a subjective experience. Self-esteem is structural, and it is 6 interlocking practices, and each one is load-bearing. If you skip one, the entire system weakens. And this model comes from Nathaniel Branden, who argued that self-esteem is not a feeling. It's a system of practices that hold your identity intact under stress. These 6 interlocking practices, each one as necessary as the next, and they exist in a sequence. So most people focus on 1 or 2. And because of that, and they kind of miss how the whole constellation works, it usually feels a little bit fragile. For example, people will talk about self-love, right? And how important that is. But unless they understand how self-love fits into kind of the more complex structure of self-esteem, that self-love will feel weak and contrived, right? Maybe they practice acceptance, or maybe they develop self-confidence. But if you don't cover all 6, then your self-regard stays lopsided in one way or another. It stays like strong in some places, but it's brittle in other ways. So, and just to be totally clear, like, this is not motivational theory. This is architectural psychology. And this author that I mentioned previously, Nathaniel Branden, in his books, Honoring the Self or the 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, spent decades researching self-esteem as a functional concept. And he identified 6 core practices that hold the structure together, basically. So today we're going to learn what each of those 6 nodes actually means, not just how they sound, why they must operate together and not in isolation, and then how to audit your alignment using a daily check. So we are going to call, here are the 6 pillars of self-esteem, and the 6-node self-esteem grid is what we're going to call this. And these 6 nodes are, number 1, conscious awareness. Number 2, self-acceptance. Number 3, self-responsibility. Number 4, self-assertion. Number 5, purposeful living. And number 6, personal integrity. So just to cover those again, number 1 is conscious awareness. Number 2 is self-acceptance. Number 3 is self-responsibility. Number 4 is self-assertion. Number 5 is purposeful living. And number 6 is purposeful integrity. So, which of these have you never tracked? Maybe all of them, like me, at a not so recent point in my life, right? And ask yourself this honestly, like, which of these 6 have you actually paid attention to in your life? Most people really conflate self-esteem with emotion and fail to break it down into these component parts, or they think of it as presence, or they think of it as confidence. But this is very different. Each node represents a form of internal credibility, a signal that tells you whether your system is aligned or not. And like any system, it can only run smoothly if all the parts are online. And each of these 6 isn't just a principle, it's a load-bearing point. So together, they form a live system of feedback. Each node is a behavioral checkpoint. It's a place where your system either reinforces or contradicts itself. So they don't necessarily operate in sequence, but they do operate in, and together they hold your internal structure. So let's review each of these 6 nodes in more detail. So conscious awareness, number 1. What do we mean by conscious awareness? Conscious awareness is the ability to perceive reality clearly, including your internal state, without distortion or avoidance. Really, what Nathaniel Branden would call this the will to think. The will to think. This is the foundation, really, of all self-esteem, is having the will to think. For Branden, it's the fundamental quality that makes human experience human, and it is the fundamental source of self-esteem and survival. It is the core life skill that you need as the foundation for all other life skills and experiences. Without awareness, without conscious awareness, you cannot tell what's real. You cannot decide to act. You cannot motivate or move yourself in a direction that you desire. And without the will to think, without conscious awareness, you are not going to be able to develop self-efficacy or self-respect. Because at some level, these are built on evidence, and evidence is a result of choices you make as a result of your will to think. And also the decision to have self-esteem ultimately also is a product of your will to think, of your conscious awareness, right? Every downstream behavior is either going to be active or reactive, depending on your will to think, depending on your conscious awareness. So that's the first pillar of self-esteem, the first element, the first node in our self-esteem network is conscious awareness. The second is self-acceptance, not self-indulgence, not self-resignation, acceptance. Acceptance means being able to witness what is true about you without shame, without denial, without evasion. And the self-acceptance node stabilizes growth, because without it, feedback feels like identity attack. So you have to accept yourself. And that allows you to face up to your weaknesses. It also allows you to acknowledge your strengths when you see them. Number 3 is self-responsibility. Self-responsibility is like your operating posture. So you own your actions and your beliefs, your emotional reactivity, right? Without this, you outsource your narrative. You become passive and moralizing or performative. So that's self-responsibility. So we've got conscious awareness, self-acceptance, self-responsibility. And then we have number 4, self-assertion. Self-assertion is where people usually struggle because this sounds like egotistical, right? Self-assertion is really the willingness to stand on your own truth and speak from it clearly and cleanly. And without this, you collapse into compliance, servitude, and deference, and being manipulated by others and staying small for others, right? Or what happens if you lack self-assertion is you just signal performatively without true alignment. The 5th node is purposeful living. Purposeful living is not the same as hustle. It is not also a grand mission to live. It is just, purposeful living is just clarity about what matters to you and what direction you're oriented in. And without purposeful living, your system drifts. You become reactive and easily co-opted by urgency or by expectation or by other people's priorities. So the next node is personal integrity. Personal integrity is the backbone of self-esteem. It's the consistency between what you say, what you believe, what you value, and what you do. And without this, everything completely fractures. Even your real true wins actually feel hollow. So let's put the grid in action. Let's put these 6 nodes of self-esteem in action, right? Let's say, for example, a client offers you work and it's high pay. It's a high paying job, but you feel hesitation. Run it through the grid. Run it through the self-esteem grid. So awareness. Do I recognize what I'm actually feeling right now? Acceptance. Can I admit that I'm conflicted without making it mean that I'm broken? Responsibility. Do I own the choice regardless of the outcome? Assertion. Am I willing to say no? And am I willing to say it clearly? Purpose. Does this move me forward towards what I've defined as meaningful? And then integrity. Will saying yes or no create coherence, or will it fracture internal coherence? Will it move me into alignment or out of alignment if I say yes or if I say no? This is how you move decisions from gut check to structural audit. What do I want to do? How do I feel? I'm flying by the seat of my pants versus awareness, acceptance, responsibility, assertion, purpose, integrity. Boom. Run the check. The self-esteem grid, right? So there's a few places in the self-esteem grid that some people will over-index or under-index. And we all have these patterns, right? Some people live in constant state of assertion, but they avoid feedback, which is low awareness. So they've got high assertion, low awareness. Some people, like, these people that journal a lot, maybe too much, maybe endlessly, where they have high awareness, but they take no aligned action, which is that mean they have high awareness, but low integrity. Some people are responsible, but they lack any directional purpose. So they burn out without actually building anything, right? So that's how this grid is meant to keep you and structurally sound in your self-esteem, because you want to cultivate all 6 of these values at the same time. These form a web that constitutes self-esteem. So over-indexing in one node while neglecting the others really creates these blind spots. And blind spots equal system leaks. And the goal isn't perfection, it's balance. Not emotional balance, structural load balance. The next thing that you want to do is really build a weekly grid review, right? Like last week, I found myself saying yes to projects that did not matter and I should not have said yes to. So my assertion was low. My purpose was unclear. My review surfaced this pattern, and I reset my filter for what earns a yes from me. So try this. Maybe on Sundays, set aside some time. Just ask yourself. And if you struggle with time blocking, I actually have a video on that. But if that I'll link in the show notes. But every Sunday, just ask yourself, where did I act with clarity? Where did I avoid or deflect what Nathaniel Branden calls evasion? Where did I evade? Which node felt offline this week? Which node felt offline this week? Then rate each of the 6 nodes in the grid 1 through 10 and write one sentence about each and choose one to track deliberately next week, preferably an area of weakness, right? That's how you make self-esteem visible. And if you want, you can actually use a tool that I built on my website that's built around some of these concepts at paulmaxwell.dev. And I'm going to give you the, if you just navigate to tools, it'll be the self-esteem assessment there, but the actual URL is paulmaxwell.dev/tools/self-esteem-assessment. But yeah, check it out. Right now it's free, and it generates like a PDF report that you can download. It uses AI. It's kind of cool. Yeah, so I'd recommend that you do that. What we covered, you learned that self-esteem isn't a feeling or a mindset. It's a 6-part system. And you saw how each node, awareness and acceptance, responsibility and assertion, purpose and integrity, they all function as behavioral signals and structural support. You ran a decision through a grid. You identified blind spots. You built a weekly audit to close the gap between intention and action. Self-esteem isn't a question of how you feel. It's whether your system can hold under friction. So here's a closing thought. Again, self-esteem isn't how you feel. It's what your system proves in silence, under load, over time. Miss one node and the signal weakens. Keep them online and you stop asking whether you're enough. You just show up and you stay whole. Self-esteem is not an outcome, it's a system. And this is how you keep it online. Check out that tool on my website. Let me know how it works for you.